welcome to Ill-Equipped History, where two best friends who are woefully unqualified to talk about history do it anyway. I am joined by my lovely, beautiful, perfect co-host, Morgan.
Hello, hello.
And how you doing today?
I'm good. I got a fresh cup of tea and I'm ready to learn some history. Tea. Sorry, that didn't...
History tea. I think it's funny.
Thank you. That was not good, but I appreciate it.
It might just be the two of us who think it's funny, but who cares?
Who cares what anyone else thinks?
Exactly. And if I sound a little, what's the word? Gravelly today, it's because I decided spending the morning canoeing yesterday was going to be a good idea, and my sinuses say that I should regret it. So I had a good time, but I'm snotty. So bear with me, guys. All right, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
It's 1628 in the Stockholm harbor in Sweden. Sailors are waving goodbye to a group of people who have gathered at the harbor to see the brand new ship leave for her maiden voyage. Two of the sailors, Abso and Sven, begin to talk about the journey ahead of them. We just left and I'm already wanting a beer.
Abso, my friend. I think it might be that you're still hungover from last night.
Don't act like you're not either, Sven. Maybe this war will end sooner than expected and we can all come back faster.
Honestly, the faster we get back, the better.
After about 15 minutes, the captain yells out for everyone to man their stations as the crowd becomes smaller by distance. Just at that moment, the wind barely kicks up and the whole ship begins to list to one side dramatically. Hold on, Ben. Something doesn't feel right. Turn the wheel, man! Quick, grab the mast! No, over here! Everyone, grab on! She's going down!
We're gonna die! Oh
no! The men hold on to the side railing of the ship as the captain tries to right her, but it's too late. The ship is going down. In a matter of a few minutes, the men are swimming to shore, where the crowd, who had watched the entire scene unfold, helped them onto shore.
So, Abso, are you ready to get that beer?
More than ever, man. More than ever.
Oh, no. You really like sinking ships, don't you?
I apparently love a good sunk ship.
The boats call to you.
It calls
from the ocean.
I just want to be one with the ocean, but maybe not in sunken ship
Go
form.
to the
I don't
boat
know why.
in the ocean. That's where you belong. Anyway.
Obviously, isn't that what we've been trying to do? We do own like 4
You
boats in this
do. You do.
house,
Honestly, like, it's bound to happen one of these days.
It truly
Statistically
is.
speaking.
It truly is. Statistically, Nick has flipped the Sea-Doo a few times, so
close enough.
Close enough. Okay, so back to 1628 ship. Do you know what ship I'm talking about?
Not a clue.
Well, I didn't either until Nick sent me that little Facebook reel, and I was like, yep, found my next topic. It is the Vasa, or Vasa is kind of more of how they say it. So before I'm going to get into like what happened, why it was built the way it was built, and then we'll get into the day of the sinking. But this ship literally sank within 20 minutes of leaving the harbor.
Honestly, like, from what that skit, like, talked about, it's a good thing because the men were able, they didn't drown, you know, they were able to go back to shore.
Right. Most of them just were like, swimming back. Okay. All right. So, pre-Vasa history. What events led to the building of the Vasa? I have my titles again.
I love your titles.
Very
Yes.
organized. So, there was a war going on between Sweden and Poland, Lithuania?
I think that's right.
Lithuania?
Good job.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm not always too Appalachian. Anyway, between 1921 and 1929, there was a war going on. On January 16th, King Gustav Adolf, and one source said Gustavus Adolphus.
Ooh.
And I don't know exactly which one is correct.
One's definitely fancier.
But, yeah, so I like Adolphus. It makes me think of a dolphin.
With great
But
porpoise.
on January 16th...
Sorry.
that shouldn't be as funny as it is.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
I am honestly so easy to derail, though. Okay, so January 16th, 1625, so a couple years into this war, King Adolphus of Sweden had his Admiral Fleming, signed a contract for 4 ships to be built by Stockholm's shipbuilders, Hendrik and Arend Hybertson, over the course of 4 years. So in 4 years, they're going to build 4 ships, 2 of which were smaller, roughly, one was 108 keel length for those 2. And then the bigger 2 were going to be about 135 feet.
Okay.
Keel length. But because war is chaos sometimes, the king changed his orders several times. So from the beginning, it was already kind of chaos from them building these boats. These shipbuilders were private shipbuilders, and they were used to making traditional boats. And which means they had like a certain way of doing things, and they didn't need a lot of plans. They didn't need to draw out blueprints and stuff like that, because they were making specific ships and they just knew what they were doing. So on September the 10th of 1625, so 8 months later, the king lost 10 ships that day. Man. Which is that's a big chunk out of a fleet in that time frame. So he was in desperate need for more ships to be built. So he demanded that those shipbuilders make the smaller 2 faster. I need them right now, because he was low on ships. Well, then he got word that the Danish king was making a ship with 2 gun decks.
Oh.
As opposed to his that only had 1 gun deck.
Oh, man.
So what do you think? What do you think a reasonable king would do?
3 gun decks.
3 gun decks. No. He was like, well, I want a ship with 2 gun decks. and the private builders were like, bro, we don't know how to make a ship with 2 gun decks. And now you're rushing us to make a ship with 2 gun decks. So they're like, you know what? We'll just do what we do best. Wing it.
Because that's
wing
the best thing to do when making a boat.
Yeah. I mean, it got me through college. I don't think it's a good way.
Did you build a boat in college?
No. I built a chocolate fish once. But
you know what? That's very impressive.
And I was winging that too. But my chocolate fish didn't have to float with 2 gun decks.
You need to take your degree right back, Missy.
My whole culinary degree, just get it out of here. Your fish didn't float.
With 2 gun decks.
Which they're not supposed to, by the way.
What?
It's only if they're dead.
What? What are you talking about?
I like my chocolate fish alive, thank you. Okay.
Anyway.
Enough of chocolate fish. So the king was like, I want two gun decks on at least I think one of his ships. And again, they don't draw out the blueprints or do anything like that. So when they were trying to figure out how to make this big ass boat with two gun decks, they were like, well, we'll just take the dimensions of the 108-foot boat, just make it bigger. In theory, that should work.
Yeah, isn't that like a law in math? Like transposing? I have no idea. Don't listen to me. I'm not good at math.
But again, they were rushed. They didn't really have clear specifications. They didn't really draw this out.
You know what I'm imagining is that this is really stupid, but like they're like, let's just make the boat bigger, and like everything just gets proportionally bigger along with the rest of the boat. Like the captain's wheel like is too tall for anyone to reach it because it also just got bigger. Sorry, that was just a really stupid.
The doors going into like the rooms inside are like 10 feet tall now. The stairs are like 3 feet tall. Just make it bigger.
All right, boss, we're making it bigger. Sorry.
This just proves we don't need to be building boats.
No one asked us to make a boat.
It will sink immediately, like the Vasa. It was our ancestors building this boat.
Okay, so anyway, the boat is bigger.
Scaled up. During building, they realized that the width at the top of the boat was 1 foot and 5 inches wider than they had originally planned. So now the top of the boat is getting to be a little too wide because, again, they're winging it. They're just kind of making it as they go. And another tragedy strikes. Henrik Hybertson, the main designer of the ship, fell ill and died in 1627.
Oh, no.
A year before the Vasa set sail.
Oh my gosh. Oh no.
So by the time that this boat was being completed, there were 5 different teams working on it and had no communication. They were just fucking about.
Oh my gosh.
Building whatever they thought was right. Now, I will state, it is a gorgeous ship. And Morgan, if you scroll all the way down, I know you've probably still have it pulled up, but there is a...
Oh, yeah.
And there's pictures. I know I might be skipping it a little bit, but if you go all the way to the last two, that's it restored. It's a beautiful ship.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
Look at all the intricate details.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
are those people?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll get into those in a second. So a little bit more of the ship's stats and issues. It was a Swedish warship, and it was built between 1626 and 1628. Okay. So, let's see, 1625. So, yeah, a year after the contract was signed, they started the Vasa. It was a flat carrier in the Swedish Royal Navy. It was 60 meters long, 50 meters tall. So, for us American listeners, it's 196 feet long. Okay. As opposed, so it's nearly 90 feet longer than the original plane. Okay. And it's 164 feet tall. So if you can imagine, this thing is long and really tall. Super
and it looks like it's not very wide. Like just from the pictures.
It's not. It's very tall and skinny. They definitely didn't make it wide enough. It was too narrow and too tall, and it was the most powerfully armed vessel in the world at the time of its completion.
Wow.
It was mostly armed with bronze cannons. How heavy would those bronze cannons be?
Oh, gosh.
And those bronze cannons were specifically made for the Vasa. And it was highly decorated and seen as a symbol of the king's ambitions for Sweden and for himself. So it's covered in elaborate carvings that depicted the king, his family, the religion, all. So that's why it's so intricately designed, because it was basically a very heavily armed flagship. But the problem with that is that the two gun decks with all these bronze cannons and all the fancy decorations and all that stuff made it very top heavy. Very top heavy. So,
and honestly, it looks like, and I'm not I don't know a lot about boats, but I think the keel is the part that's under the water. Is that right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of keel to this boat. So you're already missing, like, the part that would give you balance in the water.
Right. And though what I saw, and I should have sent you a picture of this too, but one of the sources I saw had it demonstrated where the center of gravity was, and on bigger ships, you want that center of gravity to be low in the water, which makes complete sense. I mean, even if you take something really heavy and you're like, oh, this will weigh the boat down, you don't want to put that heavy thing on the top. No. You want to put that heavy thing inside on the bottom to keep it from rocking over. I mean, it's what were those things? The Weeble Wobbles? They were top heavy, but they had they were bottom heavy. So they always stood up
exactly.
again.
It's like a ballast.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. So, before the main voyage, testing methods to check for stability weren't really created yet. They were very limited in that. They couldn't exactly test the center of gravity accurately. And most captains, which this is so stressful to me, just trial and error to learn the best way to sail specific ships. They're like, oh, well, this old girl doesn't like it when you turn this way too hard.
That's exactly what you want to do when it takes multiple years to build a ship.
Yeah, and you've got a couple hundred people on a boat that you're responsible for. You're just, again, winging it. Why? Yeah. Don't wing it with boats.
Don't do it.
They did do one test, and it's referred to as a lurch test, where 30 men ran from one side of the boat to the other, side to side, not front to back, in the harbor. They was just sitting in the harbor to test how wobbly it was.
Okay.
They had to stop after 3 rounds of this test. So just running back and forth 3 times. Because it was about to flip over in the damn harbor. Just sitting there. And I'm
sure the king or what I was like, just don't do that when you're sailing.
Even worse. Okay, for one, no one had any idea on how to stabilize it. And they could have, and I'll say, they could have added more weight in the bottom. But the problem is the original design didn't take into account a second layer of cannon deck. So now you have holes in the lower side, and you can see those in the picture. If you put too much weight in the bottom of it, now your cannon ports are water level.
That's no bueno for a boat.
No. And it already had 120 tons of weight in the bottom and would need twice that to stabilize it. So they couldn't do that. The cannon ports were too low. But the king was impatient and wanted to take her, as soon as possible. Like, is she done? I need her to go. But no one had the fucking balls to tell the king that it had problems. No one was going to be like, oh, buddy, maybe you shouldn't. I think it needs to stay in harbor just a little bit until we figure out what to do.
I think the kings in history need to be kinder so people can tell them, hey,
the truth?
like, this thing is happening. I don't want to get murdered to tell you something that's a fact because that pisses you off. So can we just work something out,
Yeah. Look, I'm just the messenger. These are the list of problems. I will fix them, but I cannot fix them tomorrow. Right. Like, can you please? So, the sinking, the day. Now, one source said August 11th, 1628, but most of them said August 10th. Okay. So, I'm going with August 10th, but I just wanted to put it out there in the world that one of them said the 11th. Okay. The king was like, the Vasa has to go to Poland right this second. It's going. So by God, people get on the boat. And she left harbor, like in our skit. People were watching this happen. She only went 1,300 meters, or 0.8 miles. For reference, because I looked it up. And this is a little nugget for you. I know nobody else is going to know where this is. But the distance between my parents' house and Corey's parents' house is 4.2 miles. It couldn't even go the distance that we used to drive as teenagers.
Wow. Wow.
It couldn't even make it to Corey's house.
Not even halfway. Like,
Not even
a
quarter of the way. It made it to the greenhouse.
I was about to say, it probably made it to, that first big turn in the road.
Yeah, that's it. So, what knocked it over? What happened was that a wind, only a little stronger than a breeze, came through, and because this was such a grand exit for this boat, all the gun ports were open, even the lower ones. And when the wind blew, and I would like to point out that it was said that the wind was so light that they raised the sails by hand and it only took one person to hold the sheets out. But that was enough for it to tip over, just enough for those cannon ports to start filling with water. And down she went. Literally the moment that Mother Earth was like, just like a little.
And my child brain is just imagine, I'm sure most people have played with water and toys in the water, and when something submerges and it goes gashunk, that's the sound effect that I'm imagining. As the ship just gashunk.
Yeah. They were only 120 meters from the shore when it sank. So I guess they were kind of following the shoreline a little bit. And people, they just, swam to shore. Probably did make the kerplunk sound. Unfortunately, 30 to 53 people did go down with the ship. No. There were conflicting numbers. One said 30, one said 53. My heart wants to say 30.
Yeah. Were they, inside when it went down? Do you know?
More than likely. Yep. And I'll talk about it more later, but when they raised it, they found some stuff, some evidence. And the funny thing is that when you think of a shipwreck, you think we're in the murky waters where, it's down deep in there. The harbor is relatively shallow, and it only sat 32 meters or 105 feet below the surface. The ship is 162 feet tall. The masts were sticking out of the water.
So it was upright in the water?
Yeah. For the most part, yeah. I mean, it did say that the masts and stuff were sticking out of the water. For reference, because I love a good reference. And this is giving me, the anxiety, because the Titanic is 4,000 meters below the surface, or 13,000 feet below the surface.
I just got a bad chill in my back.
And Yeah.
That was just a really funny noise that you had made.
I make noises when I'm stressed. I'm sorry. And the captain survived.
Okay.
And he was immediately jailed for incompetence. What? And was later released and all charges dropped.
Good, because that's not his fault.
Yeah, because the Swedish Privy Council was organized to find the people responsible for the terrible design, but I guess the main one had already died. Yeah. And nothing else was found, and no one was punished.
Well,
so they were just
and again, it's not, like, I wouldn't even say it's the builder's fault, because they had a design, and the king ordered them to stray from the design.
Right.
And didn't give them time to, like, come up with the new design.
No, because he needed that 2-gun deck boat right now.
I mean, like, and I don't know, so I'm looking at a picture of the ship. I don't know how far below, like, so there's people on the ground looking at it. It looks like it goes a little bit below what that ground is. But it's still, like, the bottom row of the cannon ports still look like they're not even halfway up the side of the ship.
They're not. Honestly, they're not. I think they're... I am jumping ahead just a little bit so you can see. If you go second picture down, you can see the back of the ship and kind of exactly where the end of it is.
I see, yeah.
And that's when they immediately raised it out of the water. So, no, that second gun port, but by the time you really set it in the water correctly, it really, those gun ports are not going to be that high off the water if it lifts just a little bit. I mean, think about it. 30 men were able to run from one side to the other, and they were worried it was gonna
flip, yeah,
like flip over. And this is actually being held up out of the water a little bit by these metal rods, it looks like. So that's probably sitting even more out of the water than it would. If I had to guess, they probably put the boat in the museum probably close to waterline. That would make the most logical sense to me. That does make sense, yeah. I don't know if that's true, but that makes sense to me. Okay, so no one got charged. But what are they going to do now? They just spent years on this boat, building this boat. It's so intricate. It was supposed to be a flagship. All these cannons are lost. It never even got used. So they were like, well, we can freaking see it. We're going to bring it back up out of the water and fix it. But unfortunately, they didn't have the technology in 1628 to be able to bring a boat like
you can't just drag it out of the water. Like, water's heavy.
Water's heavy. I'm sure there was already mud getting up in there.
Well, you said it was 128 tons, right? Like, the ship was...
of weight added to the boat for stability. So that's not even including the boat's weight. It's just the weight that was in the boat to make it, like, in the bottom of the boat.
I don't know how you're going to lift that up in 1628.
No.
8?
Yeah, they definitely didn't have the technology, so they did the next best thing. They took everything off of it that they could. I don't know how the hell they did that. I'm sure they probably dove down there and tied ropes to it, whatever, but they got most of the cannons off, what they could, and then the ship's left to deteriorate, pretty much, and is pretty much forgotten. I'm sure over the years, there'd probably be someone say, oh, well, there's an old ship in that harbor, but no one could really figure out exactly where it was. They forgot the exact location.
Okay, and so I assume the masts fell at some point or rotted away.
Yep. And I'll get into why. So, when you look in the pictures down here of them, like, pulling it up, you see that, like, a lot of the upper deck and stuff had kind of just collapsed in on itself. And that's because, well, I'll back up just a little bit. So, it was rediscovered in 1956 by Anders Franzen, a Swedish marine technician and amateur naval archaeologist. So he found it. it wasn't until 1961 that they were able to pull it up out of the water. The moment they found it, they were like, we're bringing this up out of the water. And this is an incredible shipwreck because of where it sank. The chemical composition of the waters at the Stockholm harbor are very, very low in oxygen, which means bacteria can't grow. The oxygen can't get to the water. Plus, it's super salty, and it actually kept the wood from rotting.
And I'm sure it's really cold, too.
It is. Yeah, it is. So, after all the mud and the water was pumped out of it, I guess they were able to, pump it out, and it floated.
Wow.
They just sealed up the gun ports, pumped all the water and stuff out of it, and up she came.
That's amazing. And honestly, I was going to say, because looking at these pictures, I guess the first and second pictures, you can tell it's a boat. And it's from, let's see, it was pulled up in 1961, you said? So
yep. It was 330 years under the water.
That's crazy. Yeah, and wood typically doesn't last that long in that condition.
Nope. 90% of its wood and artifacts were still intact. 90%.
That's amazing.
And only the outer few centimeters of the wood itself was damaged.
Wow.
So it was going to take centuries for it to rot under there. But the mast and stuff fell because almost all of the 5,000 iron fastenings eroded.
Okay.
Because, so it preserved the wood. It eroded the iron fastenings. So what they did to preserve it, and this is what really brought me into this, because the reel that Nick sent me explained this really well. When they brought it out of the water, they realized that the oxygen was rapidly deteriorating it. So they put steel bolts where those fastenings had been, put it back together. They took it to a museum called and I'm so sorry if I get this wrong, the W's and the V's are backwards, right?
I think so.
So it would be Vasa Waret, or in English, the Vasa Shipyard.
Okay.
If I said that wrong, please correct me. So they sprayed it with a water-soluble wax, and they did that for 17 years. So they just encased it. They just got in there and just sprayed everything with the wax and just kept the air out of it. And like I said, they added steel bolts, reconstructed it out of the original wood, and then they installed a support cradle under the ship. And after 17 years of being at the Vasa shipyard, they built its own museum that they put it in, and they were able to reduce the humidity from 95% to 60%.
Okay.
To preserve it. So, like in those pictures, you can just walk up. I mean, they're not going to let you touch it, obviously. But it's not like in its own case or anything. It's like the whole building is a display
That's
case.
really cool.
Yeah. And if you go down, you can see them building the two. And guys, I am putting this on Instagram. So when you're listening to this, definitely open Instagram, open the Facebook group. But if you go down to the third and fourth pictures, you can see them spraying. Okay. That's that wax they're spraying, and then they're building the cradle underneath it. Okay,
I see, yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I love good preservation. Yes. And you could tell they are taking such good care of the ship. And even though that it was seen as a failure at the time, it really does give us a lot of insights as to life in Sweden during that time. And they found some really interesting things on the boat. I mean, partially preserved human remains.
Oh, wow.
17 to 20 skeletons were
Wow.
found. Some still had fingernails and hair. I know.
But, oh my gosh,
But I know, an amazing find. And I highly suggest people doing this, going and looking at some of the resources that I looked at. One of them was able to reconstruct some of these people's faces.
Wow.
With the technology that we have now. It is fascinating. They actually found remains of women and children on this boat, which is insane to think about. This is a warship. This is a war flagship. But that just means that during the time of maybe non-war or non-violence, I don't know what would happen if you're just kind of out there and
like during peacetime,
a battle starts or whatever. Okay. But these sailors would bring their wives and children with them.
That's crazy.
Insane. I mean, Nick would be living his best life growing up on a ship, but they also found clothing, weapons, cannons, tools, coins, cutlery, food, drink, and 6 of the 10 sails.
Wow.
The fabric. I mean, just the thought of all that fabric and the weapons. I mean, we're talking fishing rods and probably, I don't know, guns, spears. I mean, they got cannons, tools. They were finding coins, everything. Food and drink.
It's
just preserved.
That's completely bonkers. Like, it's so hard to wrap my brain around.
I know. And like I said before, it was like a total failure at the time. But without the ship, think of all that we wouldn't know. Mm-hmm. And I think some things in history end up happening and it's a catastrophe, but we get to learn from it in the future. And I think that is so cool.
That is really cool. Thank you for sharing this. I've never heard of this.
You're welcome. I hadn't either, and I was like, ooh.
You know, it's really funny. So my next episode that is going to be released next week also is the story starts within this century that you're talking about. And it involves ships. So.
We are one. We have the same brain. Guys, I hope you're ready for 2 ship episodes. We like boats.
We like boats.
I like boats.
We both grew up on boats, so it's always going to circle back to boats.
Yeah, we would live our lives on boats if we could.
I mean, honestly, my grandparents want to live on a houseboat and like travel around the world on their houseboat.
Well, we've got that sailboat now. Neither of us know how to sail, but it's got a cabin on the inside. So when we figure it out, if anybody knows how to sail, please come teach me. But because I want to use it. It's in the pole barn, but we don't know how to use it. So it's got, we're working. It's got a head and a bed, which is weird because the toilet's at your feet. So
Ooh.
I'm going to have to get over that one.
Ooh. I don't know how I feel about that.
But there's a kitchen and a little table
that's really
in there.
Cool. Once y'all get that up and going, y'all will have to invite me on your sailboat.
Yeah. Yes, but let's make sure. I don't want to wing it and then us end up like the Vasa.
No, don't wing it.
We're not winging it.
Do not wing the boats.
Don't wing boats. Yeah, I have my boater's license, but I don't think that carries over into sailing very much. It's a little complicated of a beast. Before we go, I would like to say that we're big proponents on going and seeing history in person. If you can, if you're ever in the area of Sweden,
not even going to try to pronounce it.
It is just called the Vasa Museum. Okay. I don't know exactly what town it's in, but apparently it is like right on the river as well, because they had to float it into so they built like a little canal and they floated it into the building, which is really interesting.
And then they built a building. If you want to learn more,
right? Yeah. They built like a little box to keep it safe while they built the building, and then they put the box in the building, and then they deconstructed the box. It was wild. Definitely I will post the link to the museum in the show notes. So if we have any listeners in Sweden that haven't gone, go. If you're ever in Sweden, go. If you just want to get on their website and, I don't know, donate some money. Like, it takes a lot of money to preserve things like this. And they have really cool pictures. And I didn't even remotely get into all the things that they've done to preserve it. I just knew we weren't going to have time for all that. But there are ongoing processes. If you're really into science, they're studying the chemical composition of the wood now. A lot of sulfur has gotten into the wood, so they're really seeing how best to preserve it in the future. Check it out. Look at it. If you can go. If you can't, just look at the website. It's the next best thing. Check out the Instagram with the pictures, and it's fascinating, and it's worth looking at. So,
well, thank you for that plug.
We'll
definitely check out this website when we're done recording.
Yay. All right, well, if you want to hear more stuff like this, if you hated it, then sorry, we're still going to do more ship stuff. Check out our Instagram at Ill-Equipped History, our Facebook group, Ill-Equipped History Podcast. You can email us at Ill-Equipped History, no spaces, dashes, well, obviously no spaces, no dashes, anything like that. It's illequippedhistory@gmail.com. And we'll see you next week with another ship story, apparently.
It's close. Not quite a ship story, but... Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. And don't wing ships.
Don't wing ships.